Cyrus walked through the golden doors of the Dragon Emperor's throne room. The air was heavy with the smell of burning crystals, and the walls shimmered with scales that gleamed like molten metal. Hundreds of eyes turned toward him, dragons with long necks and glowing eyes, and beings from distant worlds with strange shapes and colors. Every step echoed on the polished floor, announcing the arrival of the young heir. The throne itself was enormous, carved from a single piece of black crystal, pulsing with a faint blue light. On it sat the Dragon Emperor, massive and golden, his wings folded behind him, his gaze sharp as a star blade. His eyes scanned Cyrus, calm but full of authority. The court expected the heir to kneel and pledge loyalty in the old way. That was the custom, the law, and the rule of tradition. Cyrus's boots tapped the floor as he walked, but he did not kneel. He looked around, past the tall advisors and armored guards, past the banners of the empire, and saw someone small, quiet, almost invisible. A human with a simple uniform, a mop in his hand, moving silently across the edge of the hall. The man's name was Kale, and he was just a janitor. Nobody noticed him, nobody cared. Yet Cyrus felt something. A pull he could not explain. In the presence of dragons and ambassadors from 1,000 worlds, he felt respect for this human who cleaned the floors with steady hands, careful eyes, and a silent courage. Kale did not bow, did not speak, did not try to impress anyone. He only did his job quietly, perfectly. The court murmured among themselves. Dragons hissed softly, and emissaries whispered in alien languages. Some raised claws and fingers to point at Cyrus, expecting him to kneel. Some thought he was foolish, reckless, or worse, disrespectful. But Cyrus ignored them all. His mind was not on politics, not on the rules, not on the fear in the eyes of the court. His mind was on Kale. As he walked, his hand brushed against the hilt of his ceremonial sword, a symbol of power and inheritance. He did not draw it. He did not need it. He walked with confidence, not arrogance, but with a sense of purpose that none of the spectators could understand. The palace had taught him to follow orders, to obey tradition, to respect hierarchy. But something inside him rebelled. Tradition was not always right. Power was not always just. And sometimes, courage came from the smallest, simplest places. Kale paused for a moment, noticing the young heir. His eyes met Cyrus's. There was no fear, only a quiet acknowledgement. The human understood something about the heir that nobody else could. Kale's hands were worn, calloused, and his face was plain, but his presence was strong. In a room full of dragons who had lived hundreds of years and diplomats who had traveled across galaxies, Kale seemed unshakable. Cyrus smiled faintly. It was almost imperceptible, but it carried warmth, curiosity, and admiration. The court whispered, wondering what the heir was thinking, but nobody guessed the truth. Cyrus was not thinking about the throne, not about the emperor, not about the rules. He was thinking about this human who had never asked for recognition, never sought glory, and yet held a quiet strength that could rival any dragon. The emperor's eyes narrowed. He did not speak, but his gaze was heavy, demanding obedience, demanding loyalty. All eyes in the room followed Cyrus as he walked straight toward the center, and still he did not kneel. The whispers grew louder. Some dragons hissed. Some emissaries fidgeted nervously. But Cyrus's pace did not falter. Kale returned his gaze calmly, almost as if he had expected this moment all along. His hands rested on the mop handle, simple and unassuming. He did not move forward. He did not step back. He only stood quiet and let the heir approach. The hall was silent now, every creature frozen. Even the guards stopped moving, their claws and weapons half raised, unsure of what would happen next. The only sound was the soft hum of the crystal banners above and the echo of Cyrus's boots on the polished floor. And then Cyrus stopped just a few feet away from Kale. He looked down at the janitor and saw something he had never seen before in the palace. A human's courage that needed no throne, no armor, no ceremony. It was simple. It was honest. It was pure. The court held its breath. Even the emperor shifted slightly on his throne, his golden claws gripping the armrests tighter. Everyone waited for the heir to kneel, to speak, to act in a way that tradition demanded. But Cyrus did none of those things. Instead, he took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and smiled at the human in a way that promised something unexpected, something impossible, and something extraordinary. For the first time in centuries, the throne room felt different. The air seemed lighter. The gold seemed warmer. And the humans, small and simple as they were, suddenly seemed capable of something that not even the dragons could predict. Cyrus had made his choice. The moment was coming, and the galaxy would never forget it. Cyrus did not stop after pausing near Kale. He began walking again, but this time his steps were faster, more certain. Every eye in the throne room followed him. Some were angry. Some were curious. Some were afraid. The diplomats whispered to each other in their strange alien tongues, trying to guess what the heir was planning. Even the guards, tall and armored with dragon scale plating, shifted nervously, unsure whether to block his path or step aside. The court had never seen an heir act like this. The tradition was clear. Approach the throne, kneel, pledge loyalty, and respect the emperor's authority. Cyrus ignored all of it. His eyes were locked on the janitor, Kale, who continued to clean the floor calmly. His movements were steady, deliberate, almost like he was used to being invisible. Yet for some reason the heir could not look away. Whispers grew louder as Cyrus passed the rows of gold banners and towering columns. "He will be punished," some muttered. "The heir is foolish," hissed others. The dragons, long used to seeing humans as weak and insignificant, tilted their heads in disbelief. The emperor's eyes narrowed, a flicker of irritation crossing his massive golden face. He had trained Cyrus to follow rules, to respect the hierarchy, to behave like a proper heir. And now, the young dragon-human hybrid seemed determined to break every law at once. Cyrus ignored them all. He could feel the energy of the room, the tension like electricity in the air. He could feel the eyes on him, the judgment, the fear, the expectation. But most of all he felt something else, something unexpected. Hope. Not just for himself, but for the human who had never asked for anything. Kale noticed the heir coming closer. For a moment he froze, unsure if he should step aside. But then he did what he always did. He stayed calm, stayed honest, stayed himself. He was small, human, ordinary in appearance. Yet in that simple presence, there was a quiet strength, a courage that had grown from years of doing what was right without praise or recognition. Cyrus's heart beat faster. He had known many humans in his life, some brilliant, some clever, some strong in their own way. But none had ever struck him like Kale. The janitor's bravery was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was not shown in battles or speeches. It was quiet, patient, and real. And now, in the middle of the emperor's throne room, Cyrus felt compelled to honor that courage. The court shifted uncomfortably. Some dragons hissed. Some emissaries rose slightly from their chairs, trying to see better. The older advisors whispered urgently to each other, their long fingers tapping on golden desks. "He cannot do this," one said, voice trembling. "He will bring shame to the throne." Another muttered, "No one has ever dared to move toward a human like that, let alone touch one in the presence of the emperor." Cyrus did not answer. He did not slow his pace. His eyes were fixed on Kale. Every step he took seemed to challenge the old rules, every movement a quiet rebellion. He could feel the weight of history on his shoulders, the centuries of tradition pressing down on him. And yet he could not turn back. The emperor's claws clicked against the armrest of his throne. His massive wings shifted slightly. He had seen many acts of bravery in his long life, but none like this. None that combined defiance, honesty, and instinctive respect for a human in such a way. His advisors were gasping, whispering, some even trembling. But the emperor only watched. Cyrus's pace increased. He could hear the whispers turning into murmurs, murmurs into gasps. He ignored them. His focus was entirely on Kale, the human who had never asked for glory but now, unknowingly, commanded the heir's full attention. Kale stopped cleaning for a moment just to meet the heir's eyes. He did not flinch. He did not smile or frown. He simply stood there, humble and calm. And in that calm, Cyrus saw the reflection of something greater than any treasure, any throne, or any dragon's power: integrity, courage, and the simple strength of being true to oneself. The court grew silent, the tension thick. Every creature in the room waited. The whispers had stopped. Even the armored guards froze in place, unsure what would happen next. Every eye followed Cyrus as he moved closer, closer, until only a few steps separated him from Kale. And then Cyrus stopped. He looked down at the human and took a deep breath. The air was heavy with anticipation, but he did not hesitate. In that moment he made a choice. He chose the path of honesty, the path of courage, the path that honored humanity's quiet, unassuming power. The dragons tilted their heads, the emissaries held their breath, and the emperor's golden eyes glinted with surprise. The heir had done what no one expected. He had decided that the smallest, simplest human deserved recognition. And Cyrus was ready to show it. A faint smile crossed his face, one that held excitement, respect, and a promise of something extraordinary. The moment was coming. The court could feel it even if they did not understand it yet. The galaxy was about to witness something no one had ever imagined. Cyrus stood just a few feet away from Kale. The room felt impossibly still, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Hundreds of eyes from dragons, aliens, and diplomats were fixed on the heir and the janitor. Even the emperor, golden and massive on his throne, leaned forward slightly, his claws pressing the armrests tighter. The silence was heavy, like the calm before a storm. Kale looked up at Cyrus, meeting his gaze directly. He did not step back. He did not move forward. He only stood quietly, his hands resting on the mop, unsure what was coming. He had cleaned these floors countless times, seen the emperor's throne hundreds of times, but never in his life had he imagined that a dragon emperor's heir would run past the guards, past the court, and stop just for him. Cyrus's heart was racing, but his expression was calm. He reached out slowly, not with hesitation but with certainty. His hand moved through the air, past the rows of whispers and gasps toward the human. The court froze even more. The tension was so thick it could almost be cut with a sword. Then, without a word, Cyrus stepped forward and embraced Kale. The hug was brief, but it carried a weight that no one in the room had expected. It was not just a physical touch. It was recognition, respect, and admiration all at once. It was the heir saying without words, "I see you. I respect you. You matter." Gasps filled the throne room. A dragon hissed sharply, wings flaring. Some of the diplomats' mouths hung open in shock. Even the emperor's eyes widened for a fraction of a second, a flicker of surprise crossing his massive golden face. No heir had ever touched a human in this way in the history of the empire. It was unheard of. It was dangerous. And yet it felt right. Kale froze at first. His hands gripped the mop handle, unsure how to react. He had never been praised, never been celebrated. His life had been simple, quiet, unnoticed. And yet here was a young dragon human heir hugging him in the center of the grand throne room, in front of the emperor and the court. He felt warmth he had never known before, a sense of worth that words could never describe. Slowly Kale relaxed. He placed a hand on Cyrus's shoulder, steadying him as if to say, "I understand." It was a small gesture, but it carried more meaning than any speech. In that moment, the heir and the janitor shared something that no crown, no dragon, no army could ever give. Mutual respect, understanding, and recognition of bravery. The court was silent, stunned. Whispers began to spread again, this time in awe rather than judgment. Some dragons lowered their heads, studying the human more closely. Some emissaries leaned forward, realizing that something incredible was happening. The heir had broken tradition, yes, but he had shown something that no one could argue with. The human's quiet courage and moral strength were undeniable. The emperor leaned back on his throne, golden eyes locked on the two figures. He did not speak. He did not move. He only watched. Centuries of authority and power had taught him to expect obedience and respect, not rebellion or defiance. Yet in that moment he could not deny what he saw. The hug was not disrespectful. It was honest. It was brave. It was human. Cyrus pulled back slightly, enough to look at Kale's face. "You are stronger than anyone here gives you credit for," he said softly. His voice was calm but firm. "You do what is right even when no one notices. That is true courage." Kale swallowed, still stunned, and nodded. I only do my job," he replied quietly, but there was pride in his tone now, a pride he had never felt before. He had spent his life serving quietly, unnoticed, and yet here he was, acknowledged by a dragon emperor's heir. The court murmured again, this time with a mixture of shock and admiration. Some dragons exchanged glances, realizing they had underestimated humans for centuries. The diplomats whispered rapidly to one another, sending messages back to their home worlds. A human had been honored in front of the Dragon Emperor's court, in front of the galaxy's elite, and the heir had done it boldly, without fear. Cyrus stepped back fully now, giving Kale space, but his gaze did not leave the human. "The world measures strength in crowns and claws," he said, addressing no one in particular, "but courage, honesty, and integrity, those cannot be measured. And sometimes they come from the smallest and most unlikely beings." Kale looked around at the court, at the dragons, at the emissaries, and finally at the emperor. For the first time he felt like more than a janitor. He felt seen, respected, and important. And all of it came from a human's courage being recognized by the heir of dragons. The emperor's golden eyes softened just a fraction. He did not smile. He did not speak. But even he could feel the truth of what had happened. A small human, doing his work quietly, had earned the attention and respect of the heir. And in that, there was power greater than any throne, any army, or any empire. The moment lingered. The court could feel it even if they did not understand it fully. Something had changed in the room. Something had changed in the way humans would be seen from this day forward. And for Cyrus and Kale, it was only the beginning. The heir had run past tradition, past expectation, and had done something that no one thought possible. He had hugged a janitor. And in that hug, the galaxy had just witnessed the quiet, unstoppable strength of humanity. The throne room was still quiet after the hug. Cyrus stepped back but did not move away. Kale, still a little stunned, straightened, feeling something he had never felt before: recognition. The court remained frozen, whispers spreading like wildfire through the rows of dragons, aliens, and diplomats. Nobody had ever imagined a human could be treated with such honor in the Emperor's palace, let alone hugged by the heir. For a moment, the human janitor seemed small, fragile, and ordinary. But then one of the older advisors, a dragon with scales the color of polished bronze, spoke up, his voice trembling. "Wait, he is not just a janitor," the dragon said. "He saved the Emperor." The court turned in shock. The dragon repeated the story slowly and carefully. While the humans and dragons had been distracted with preparations for the Emperor's latest celebration, Kale had noticed a strange energy pattern near one of the palace doors. Hidden in the shadows, a dangerous group had tried to sneak in. No one else saw them. Kale acted without thinking. He diverted the intruders silently, warned the palace staff, and prevented what could have been a disaster that no one in the Empire would have survived. Murmurs ran through the court like lightning. Humans had always been underestimated, considered weak and fragile, but here was proof that even the smallest, quietest human could save lives. Even the dragons could not ignore it. Some lowered their heads, their long necks bowing slightly in respect. Some emissaries whispered to each other urgently, their messages full of awe. The Emperor leaned forward on his throne, golden claws pressing the armrests, his eyes glowing faintly with a mixture of surprise and reflection. Centuries of power had taught him to respect strength, to respect cunning, and to respect fearlessness. But he had never considered the quiet bravery of someone who worked in the shadows, unnoticed, and yet acted with courage when it mattered most. Cyrus looked at Kale, pride shining in his eyes. "I knew there was more to you than anyone realizes," he said softly. "You have courage that cannot be measured by rank or birth. You have saved lives without seeking glory. That is what makes you extraordinary." Kale's face flushed. He had spent his life unnoticed, cleaning floors, carrying water, mending equipment, and avoiding attention. And yet now, the heir of dragons was praising him in front of the entire court. He could feel the weight of centuries of doubt and underestimation lifting from his shoulders. The court continued to murmur, slowly coming to understand what had happened. Diplomats leaned forward, dragons tilted their heads, and advisors whispered urgently to one another. The whispers became questions. Can humans be this strong? Is it possible that we judge them too quickly? The heir, he sees what we cannot. The Emperor finally spoke, his voice deep and steady, carrying through the room. "Cyrus has acted boldly," he said. "And the human before us has proven himself. This changes things." His golden eyes scanned Kale, lingering in a way that made the human feel both nervous and respected. Not all strength comes from claws or fire. Some strength comes quietly, unseen, and yet it can alter the course of empires. The court fell silent again, this time in reverence. Kale felt the eyes of dragons and aliens on him, not with judgment but with respect. For the first time in his life, he understood that courage and honor were not measured by wealth, by birth, or by the size of one's body. They were measured by the choices one made, the actions taken when no one is watching, and the bravery to do what is right. Cyrus smiled faintly. He took a step closer to Kale, not as a prince to a servant, but as one human being to another. "You've taught them something today," he said softly. "Even the Emperor has learned it. Sometimes, the quietest, simplest acts of courage speak louder than any roar or command." Kale nodded, still overwhelmed but feeling a new sense of purpose. He had lived his life in the shadows, unnoticed and unremarkable. But now he saw that even humans like him could make a difference, could inspire change, and could be recognized across the galaxy for their bravery. The dragons in the court slowly lowered their heads in respect. The diplomats whispered urgently, sending messages across the stars about the human who had been honored by the Dragon Emperor's heir. And the Emperor himself remained silent, but there was a change in him, a softening in his gaze, a recognition that strength could take many forms, even in the smallest human. Cyrus placed a hand on Kale's shoulder gently, a gesture of solidarity and friendship. The court watched, amazed, as the heir of dragons acknowledged the heroism of a human with no throne, no armor, no weapons, only courage and integrity. In that moment, something shifted in the palace. The rules, the hierarchy, the centuries of tradition, all of it felt different. Humanity's quiet bravery had broken through the walls of the empire and reached the heart of the Dragon Emperor's court. Kale felt a new fire within him. He had lived a life of service, of small, unnoticed acts. But now he realized that even the simplest courage could ripple across the galaxy. And beside him, Cyrus smiled, ready to show the court that there was no limit to what humanity could inspire. For the first time, the Emperor's throne room seemed lighter, brighter, and full of possibility. And for the humans watching from across the stars, this small, unseen janitor had become a symbol of hope, courage, and the quiet power that humanity always carried within itself. The throne room was quieter than it had ever been. Dragons lowered their heads, emissaries leaned forward, and even the older advisors whispered in disbelief. Cyrus stood beside Kale, the janitor who had just been revealed as a hidden hero. For the first time in centuries, the heir of the Dragon Emperor had not only broken tradition but had rewritten the meaning of honor in the eyes of the court. Kale looked around nervously. The golden banners, the crystal columns, the polished floors, they were all the same as always, but the energy in the room had changed. It was warmer, lighter, almost alive. The court that had once ignored him now regarded him with respect. He, a human with no title, no weapon, no army, had earned a place among dragons and diplomats, simply by being brave and true to himself. Cyrus placed a hand on Kale's shoulder. "You've shown them," he said quietly, "that courage isn't measured by size, birth, or species. It's measured by choices. By doing what is right when no one is watching. By standing tall when it matters most." The Emperor's golden eyes scanned the two of them, lingering on Kale. He did not speak at first, but his gaze was heavy with thought. Centuries of ruling had taught him to respect power, cunning, and fearlessness. But now, in the presence of this small human, he saw something he had never considered. Courage born from humility, strength that did not roar, and honor that did not demand recognition. Finally he spoke, his voice deep and commanding, yet soft enough to fill the room. "Let this day mark a change," he said. "The courage of one human has shown the court that even the smallest beings can carry the weight of greatness. The heir has acted wisely. The human has acted bravely. And in that all of us must learn and adapt." The court murmured. Dragons tilted their heads, some hesitating, some nodding slowly. The emissaries whispered to each other urgently, sending messages across galaxies. The name Kale, the human janitor, would travel far and wide, a symbol of courage and integrity that no throne, no army, and no empire could ever ignore. Cyrus stepped fully beside Kale, his arm brushing lightly against the humans. He looked out across the room, meeting the eyes of dragons, humans, aliens, and advisors alike. "Strength is not only measured in fire and teeth," he said. "Sometimes it is measured in heart. Sometimes it is measured in quiet courage. Today we have seen it and we will not forget it." Kale swallowed. He had spent a lifetime serving quietly, unnoticed, believing that small acts mattered only in small ways. And yet here he was, honored in front of the greatest beings in the galaxy. It was overwhelming, humbling, and exhilarating all at once. For the first time he felt that his life, simple as it had been, had meaning beyond what he had ever imagined. The Emperor nodded slowly. He lowered his wings slightly and relaxed his posture, signaling a rare approval. The dragons and emissaries in the room followed his example. Respect rippled through the hall, quiet but unmistakable. The heir's choice and the human's courage had reshaped the atmosphere of the court entirely. Cyrus turned to Kale and smiled. "The galaxy sees you now," he said. "They see that humans are capable of courage, integrity, and strength beyond what anyone expects. They will remember this day." Kale felt a warmth in his chest. He could hardly speak, but he nodded, understanding the weight of what had happened. A simple janitor, a human, had become a symbol of something greater. And beside him, the heir of the Dragon Emperor had chosen to honor that symbol publicly, boldly, and without hesitation. The court began to stir, not with fear or anger, but with a quiet energy of respect and possibility. The dragons whispered to one another, the diplomats shared amazed glances, and the advisors began to discuss new policies and ideas, all inspired by the courage of one human. For the first time, the palace seemed less like a place of strict hierarchy and more like a place where merit, bravery, and honesty mattered. Cyrus stepped forward and gestured to the human. "Let this be a lesson to all of us," he said. "Power does not belong only to those born into it. Respect is earned by action. Courage is not measured by claws, wings, or fire, it is measured by the heart. And today humanity has shown us the way. Kale looked around, taking in the room, the dragons, the banners, and the throng of eyes watching him. He realized something extraordinary, that even the smallest, quietest acts of bravery could ripple across the galaxy and inspire change in the mightiest empires. He had never sought glory, but now he had it, not because of wealth or title but because he had been brave, honest, and true. The Emperor finally leaned back on his throne, wings folded, eyes thoughtful. He did not speak further, but his expression carried approval, understanding, and perhaps even a hint of pride. The galaxy would remember this day not for a throne, not for a crown, but for the courage of a human janitor and the wisdom of an heir who saw him. Cyrus and Kale stood together at the center of the room. One was an heir of dragons, a prince of the empire. The other was a human who had lived in shadows, unnoticed and quiet. And yet together they had changed the court, challenged tradition, and shown the galaxy the true strength of humanity. For humans everywhere it was a story of hope. For the dragons it was a lesson in humility. And for the heirs who would come after, it was a reminder that courage and integrity were the greatest powers of all. And in the quiet, shining throne room, the unlikely pair, heir and janitor, stood side by side, and the empire and perhaps the galaxy began to change forever.